What is going on, Governor? Chisgule here, and today we're going to revisit our commander guide on Cao Cao. Is he still good in 2020? Stick around to find out. Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking all about Cao Cao, who is one of the first legendary commanders that you can get your hands on in Rise of Kingdoms. And a lot has changed since we first made a commander guide over a year and a half ago on this guy right over here. We're going to very briefly review the skills, the talents, and we do have a lot more information on great talent builds for this commander. We're going to talk about how you unlock them, and most importantly, how you pair this commander with all of the new commanders that have entered into Rise of Kingdoms. So if you like commander guides, then you should like and subscribe. We've got a guide for just about every commander, and are redoing some of these guides that are a little out of date. Now, Cao Cao is a phenomenal cavalry, peacekeeping, mobility commander. What does that mean to you? You're going to use all cavs with this commander. They're going to be really great for barbarians. And they're also really good for moving around the battlefield very, very quickly. Now, the high-level summary of are they still good in 2020 is yes. They have a more niche role than they did before when there were fewer commanders available, and that role is being able to get around the battlefield quickly. This is relevant both for when you're battling barbarians, especially rallying forts that are far away. I use Cao Cao as the primary. Or if you're running around killing barbarians in the field, you want to bring a lot of marches, Cao Cao is a great pick. And the last thing I would strongly recommend him for is open field combat, in particular, where you use Cao Cao as the primary and you want to move around the battlefield really quickly to kill farmers or to escape an enemy. We'll talk all about how you do that. Now, to very briefly review the skills that are at your disposal, the first skill does a damage factor of 1,400. It does an attack reduction for 3 seconds of 40%, and also a march speed reduction of 10% for 3 seconds. 10% is pretty modest, but I'll take the march speed reduction, and there are commanders that care about that. You can get a 50% boost to damage to neutral units and barbarians, or at least it used to read neutral units and barbarians. Maybe it's just barbarians now. That's actually a little bit of a head scratcher. I'll get back to that. 10% of march speed and 30% cav attack at max. And last but not least is a healing factor of 1,000 and a rage restoration of 100 from your normal attacks. There's a 10% chance that you can get that to happen, and it can only happen once every 5 seconds. That's called an internal cooldown. It's not shared to cooldown with other things, just with itself. The expertise skill is certainly dated, but still powerful. You get 25% attack and lose 10% defense. That means that when you have expertise, this commander, because of this expertise skill over here, you're going to be better off in situations where you're hitting someone else and they're not hitting you back. Now, since we first made a video about Cao Cao, and I'll have a card up in the top for all of my old videos, because they are kind of amazing to go watch, where at one point we, had them at like level 37. We were talking about builds. At another point, we maxed them out and expertise them. Anyways, let's get a look at the talents here. There are several builds we could recommend to you, but honestly, this is the one we use all the time. This is a maximum march speed build. This is the literal fastest you can get a commander to move in the game. We use them as the primary, and it's the mobility tree that is affording us this. We're also getting a lot of march speed in the peacekeeping tree, and we are getting some additional march speed in the cavalry tree. Along the way, we picked up charge to get a cool 30% extra march speed if we drop below 50%. This is the maximum speed build in the game. We use this for Ark of Osiris to capture structures and to move really quickly if that's what we need. Now, there are a couple other builds that you could use if you wanted to use a full cavalry build and a little bit of mobility. My recommendation would be something like what I have here. We've almost entirely maxed out the cavalry tree so that we can do really well in quick bursts of combat, getting an extra 15% damage for the first 10 seconds of that combat, getting the extra rage generation from Undying Fury, and importantly, hasty departure. Now, hasty departure is what makes this commander really good in the open field if what you want to do is move really fast and be hard to hit. When you leave a structure, that means resource node, flag, fort, city, you get a 60% march speed boost, and that is huge. This is what lets you move really fast around the field to kill farmers. In addition to charge, when you get below 50% health, you're just almost uncatchable at that point. You're moving 90% faster, which is really fast. So this is a build I would highly recommend if what you want to do is run around and slay farmers. We also did pick up a little bit of extra march speed over here and over here. So we got a lot of punch from the cavalry tree and some march speed over here. The other way you could approach this is to just do a little flipperoo over here. You could focus in on mobility if you wanted to be super slippery and hard to catch with a little bit of punch from the cav tree. I feel like doing this the other way around is better, and I also feel like time management gives you a fair amount of march speed, but is a liability. This is the top of the mobility tree. The downside of this is that you're slowed when you're being attacked, which means if you ever do get caught, you are in some trouble. I think that you're better off leaning on the hasty departure talents and sticking with a build that looks a little more like this. Now, you could go the route of a peacekeeping cavalry tree if what you wanted to do was battle barbarians. I have that build. Let me show you what that looks like on a different commander, but you would pick basically the same sorts of talents. Here is what this looks like on Minamoto. If you wanted to go all in on a sustain cav build, you and peacekeeping build for battling barbarians, you would get Curing Chant. You would make your way up into the cavalry tree for the extra march speed. In my opinion, I like to get around quickly. And these points that I have over here, you could instead invest over to Undying Fury, which would do really well for you for generating rage. You could also optionally drop some points into Mighty Force if the thing that you're doing is rallying forts. In that case, don't pick up Curing Chant. That's not really what you need. I personally don't use Cao Cao for the primary on forts unless I need to get there insanely fast, in which case I kind of don't care about all the other stuff in the tree. I just go max march speed. So that's how I'm using my Cao Cao now. I never change his build. The build I use right here, I use this for forts in Kingsland and KVK when we were rallying level 10 forts, and it's a race for who can get there first. And I use this in Arc. So this is the build I use, and I never change it. I think this is pretty solid. I even use this when I'm running around battling barbarians, and that is because you already have Insight, reducing the AP cost by 10 for battling barbs, which is very important for efficiency. Now, when we talk about unlocking this commander, this is very important. This is a commander you can get from gold keys. Now, because you can get them from gold keys, my advice to you is to be very wary of investing your universal sculptures in this commander, because once you've expertised them, those sculptures are a total waste. You can see here that I have 431 extra Cao Cao sculptures. So from the time that I expertised him to now, I've accumulated 431 of his sculptures from gold keys, and they just sit here and do nothing. So that's almost like halfway to an expertise skill. It's more than halfway to an expertise skill worth of sculptures. Now, it doesn't really work that way because, look, yes, if I didn't use any universals, potentially, maybe today I could put the expertise on him, but I've been using him this entire time and enjoying him, so it doesn't quite work that way. Now, there are other places you can get this commander, by the way, and one of those main places is going to be from the daily special offer. If you have not expertise Cao Cao, then when you look at the info button for each of these chests, the orange chest you see here might contain Cao Cao. That's the first commander that shows up in these chests. If you wanted to expertise the commander primarily from buying these chests, that's going to run you about $700 in total, which sounds kind of insane. You are getting a lot of other things here that are pretty solid. Among these, I think that obviously getting the gold keys and the AP is pretty sweet from the $3 Treasure of the King. If you want to spend the least amount of money possible to expertise the commander, then you could just buy the $1 bundle every day, and that's certainly a lot cheaper, although it's going to add up over time. Now, the way that these boxes work is that when you open it, 1 in every 3 is guaranteed to have between 1 and 10 legendary commander sculptures. Now, after you've expertise Cao Cao, the commander that will come from this bundle will change. It will be Charles Martel. And after you have both Charles Martel and Cao Cao expertise, then these boxes will include El Cid. And after you have all of them expertised, it'll be Caesar, then Mehmed, and then Freddy. So that's the order in which that happens. This is one more place you can get Cao Cao. Cao Cao also, at some point in our kingdom, showed up on the Wheel of Fortune. So yet another place that you could potentially score some Cao Cao sculptures. My advice to you would be to sincerely avoid using your universals on Cao Cao because, honestly, he's amazing. You will want to expertise him. There's a lot of ways you can get him, though. So hold off on that investment until you've already done commanders like Isong and Richard I. Those are commanders that don't show up other places than the Wheel of Fortune. And after that, you're kind of out of luck for a while until eventually they show up in Card King. So these are the great places to put your first universal commander sculptures because you're not going to get them other ways and you're not feeling like there's waste every time you open up a gold key and they show up after you've expertised them. So that was where I would go before investing in Cao Cao with universal sculptures. Now, with that said, the pairing possibilities have changed a whole heck of a lot. Since the game first launched. And I guess there is one more thing about these skills I need to cover, which is the order in which you should invest in them. Always max the first skill on a legendary commander before you proceed, with, I suppose, the exception of the gathering commanders, okay? So max the first skill. From there, if you want to focus on killing barbarians, then I would max the second skill before you proceed. But you could, in my opinion, very comfortably take this commander to 5-1-1-1, taking him to 4 stars, and you can then get the benefit of all of these skills over here as well. And the advantage of doing that is if you care about open field combat, you now have a 2/3 chance that something will end up in an open field combat related skill, and only a 1/3 chance it's something that is just for barbarians. If you are prioritizing, I don't think a mobility commander is the most important to have at 6 stars in the early game. You have other options like a Dragon Lancer that you could use at the start of the game if you want to run around and kill farmers. And I know Dragon Lancer is a really weird early game choice, but believe me, people have racked up insane amounts of kills in the first Mighty Governor with a Dragon Lancer. So this is not the first commander I would take to 6 stars. This is a commander you could take to 4 stars, never use them as the primary, and be in a really good position. Remember, for a primary commander, you get the benefit of their talents, their skills, and their gear. If this commander is just the secondary, all that matters is the skills right over here, and this is a great secondary commander. To that end, the first and obvious pairing is Minamoto. Minamoto, Winamoto, Moneymoto, whatever you prefer, is a phenomenal pair. They are the best barbing pair in the game still, over a year and a half later. Both of them are a phenomenal investment. Card up in the top if you want to see my video about is Minamoto still good in 2020. If you're using these commanders for forts, Minamoto is a better primary commander because the talents available are better for taking out forts. The skill tree is just better than the mobility tree. With that said, if you're running long distances, use Cao Cao as the primary, Minamoto as the secondary. I do that literally all the time, and it's a great pair. Continuing forward in optimal pairings, Saladin Cao Cao is a solid pair as well. Saladin is going to bring a lot of tankiness. My recommendation is that the Saladin is the better primary if what you're doing is battling in the open field and you're not micromanaging just one single march. If you are, again, running around to kill people for Mighty Governor, use your Cao Cao as the primary. The next awesome pair is Khan. For a long time, Khan Cao Cao was one of the most scary rally combos. In KVK Season 1 is when we experienced that. I think for most people that's in Season 2 that this would show up. Khan Cao Cao is phenomenal DPS. We actually use Khan a whole heck of a lot for other things. I'll just say that in this combo, Khan should be the primary, unless what you're doing is killing people for Mighty Governor, in which case you're going to want to use Cao Cao Primary. Continuing onward to a few other options, you can pair with Ethelfled. I don't love it. Use Ethelfled Primary, Cao Cao Secondary, Rally Forts, I guess. Not the thing that I think you should be doing, because you're going to bring mixed troops to get the max benefit from Ethelfled, which means that you are not going to get the march speed from Cao Cao. I don't love that. You could pair Attila and Cao Cao. I think that's a little bit weird of a pairing. Attila should be the primary for most things. Cao Cao will be the secondary. The only time in which Cao Cao is the primary and Attila is the secondary is if you want to run around and kill farmers. And even then, this is a weird choice. He does have a lot of march speed, which makes it an okay choice. But I still think it's just so-so compared to other things you could be doing. On the topic of other things you could be doing, Freddy and Cao Cao is kind of a legit cavalry pair. They're shockingly solid as a cavalry pair. You probably want to use Freddy as the primary if what you're going to do is just like smash somebody in the open field. And if what you want to do is kill farmers, again, Cao Cao primary. Another option in a similar vein as Caesar, I think I prefer the Freddy than the Caesar. The reason for that is that I like that you're getting some amount of rage from Cao Cao to power out Freddy, who just does insane amounts of raw damage, and Freddy is going to give you more troops to the battlefield over here and a good amount of healing and sustain. In a similar vein, you could use Mehmed II. This is an interesting pairing because you're going to get a lot of damage from Mehmed, hitting multiple targets, and the mobility from Cao Cao will be strong. Cao Cao as the primary if what you want to do is kill farmers. One additional legendary pair, and I told you there's like so much new stuff in 2020 we got to talk about, is Takeda. Takeda, I think, is a fine pairing. Both of them have cavalry and mobility trees. However, Takeda has the versatility tree. For that reason, you are better off with Cao Cao as the primary, Takeda as the secondary. I think they're an okay pair, but you probably can do better. They don't have a ton of synergy. I mean, they're good, but I think you can find stronger synergy in the other pairings that we shared. Theoretically, you could pair with Charlemagne. That feels a little weird to me. If you were rallying a city, you could do it. Charlemagne primary, Cao Cao secondary, and bring all cavalry, and it would not be the worst. In a similar weird vein, Sun Tzu is amazing in a ton of places. If you were using Cao Cao primary, you could use a Sun Tzu secondary for open field battling. I think you can do better, but Sun Tzu's just so good, you probably would put him somewhere else. Scipio is weird for the same reason I think Caesar would be a weird pick. You could bring full cavalry. I think this would be fine. I feel like you can do better. On the topic of better, Joan of Arc with Cao Cao secondary, all cavalry is kind of good. That's a solid pairing. I would recommend it highly. You're going to power out a ton of Joan of Arc's active skill, which is going to give a ton of boost to all your allies nearby. This is a sweet pair. I would recommend it highly. In a similar vein, I think Boudica is a solid pairing. Unfortunately, she doesn't have a lot of skill tree options. The integration tree is weird. However, peacekeeping and skill is really solid if what you're doing is battling barbs. Use her as the primary, Cao Cao as the secondary. If what you're doing is running around smashing people in Mighty Governor, specifically farmers, then Cao Cao primary, Boudica secondary, fine choice. Now this is a really interesting pairing. I really like Pelagius. Think of Pelagius as like a mini Minamoto, except he's even more versatile in that he's got a fair amount of healing and he's got rage generation. So I think Pelagius is like the substitute for Minamoto as a primary. If you want to use Minamoto primary and Cao Cao secondary, you could just use Pelagius primary, Cao Cao secondary, and it does the same thing. In a similar vein, if what you need is the mobility, Cao Cao primary. For barbarians, Lohar Cao Cao is phenomenal. You can use them. Lohar is more for barbarians than barbarian forts. Keep that in mind. Belisarius and Cao Cao are doing kind of the same thing. They've got the exact same breakdown of talents, which means that if you are on a budget, Belisarius works as the primary, and you don't need to use Cao Cao as the primary. Use your Belisarius. And honestly, Belisarius is kind of like your mini Cao Cao substitute here. You can use them in all the same ways that you would use Cao Cao. but they are a whole heck of a lot easier to access. I would make the argument that your Cao Cao is probably better than an expertise epic in the realm of like 5, like 1, 3, 1, something in that range. It's kind of hard to say exactly what that looks like, but that's probably about right. They're slightly different, right? Like this guy gets a damage boost against weaker armies. He also gets a march speed boost when you're out of combat. They're a little bit different. This commander is very solid for running around and slaying people in Mighty Governor, particularly killing those folks that are trying to farm. Like you use Belisarius Cao Cao, you're going to be difficult to catch. In a similar vein, I think Baibars you can think of kind of like a version of Pelagius, but less sustain and more AoE. That's the way I would think about Baibars. The way Baibars works is he can hit more targets. He doesn't generate rage for you, but he can hit up to 5 targets with AoE. He does have 20% of attack, but doesn't have as many defensive stats like Pelagius. You do get a slight heal and march speed boost when you leave combat, which is pretty cool too. And if I'm not mistaken, there is also, in fact, a march speed reduction. When expertise, that march speed reduction is 50%, which helps you chase folks down. So think of it this way. If you would have used Minamoto or Pelagius as a primary, you could also use Baibars as a primary for all those situations. That would include primarily battling people in the open field. If you're like, there to play and to stay and to hit hard. If what you want to do is be really maneuverable, again, Cao Cao primary, the mobility tree, you just can't overestimate it. In a similar vein, I think Osman can be very solid for the same reason that Freddy can be solid. Osman wanted Rage Shen, Cao Cao has Rage Shen. Osman wanted Sustain, Cao Cao has a teeny bit of Sustain. They pair together nicely. In a similar vein to Pelagius, I think you use Osman as the primary if what you want to do is battle people in the open field. You use Cao Cao as the primary if you want to snipe people for Mighty Governor. And that is all the epics and legendaries. Man, you've got options in 2020. And this is just the beginning of 2020. You could also use Lancelot in the very, very, very early game. Lancelot has comedically less versatility than Cao Cao as a primary because they have the versatility tree. And the versatility tree is pretty much worthless. With that said, though, because they are a blue commander, they are elite, they are way, way, way less experienced to level up. So you could use Lancelot primary and Cao Cao secondary in Mighty Governor, and that's a fine choice running around and just killing killing farmers that are, in the battlefield. Of course, the even cheaper choice for that, and slightly faster, Dragon Lancer's got 10% march speed over here, right? Whereas Lancelot's only got 5% march speed. You could use a Dragon Lancer Cao Cao, and look, the versatility tree, as it turns out, way less versatile because there's not a peacekeeping tree in the same spot like Cao Cao has. However, if you're not battling barbarians and you're just slaying people in Mighty Governor, Dragon Lancer primary will work just fine for you and is a whole heck of a lot cheaper to expertise. Or take to 60. That's what I meant. And there's no expertise on this guy. I'd kind of love if they did something with that, but whatever. So hopefully you found something helpful in this video or enjoyable. Leave a comment down below with your favorite Cao Cao pairing. I'd be kind of eager to see what that is. I still use Cao Cao extensively in 2020, and I feel like you should be too. If you're battling barbs, if you want to get around the field quickly and wreck people that are farming in Mighty Governor, Cao Cao, we'll put him on the screen. This guy over here, he's your go-to. He's still got the kicks and the speed. Until next time, my friends, you have fun smashing the kingdom. And seriously, check out those old videos that I had cards for. They are hilarious. One of them, I'm 4 million power. I don't even have a face cam. The video doesn't fit the screen. It's pretty funny.